Welcome to the Ohio Department of Youth Services podcast, The Future in Focus. I'm your host, Chaba Sukos. Thanks for joining us here for episode 12 of our journey through juvenile justice. This podcast was created to help viewers and listeners better understand the juvenile justice continuum and the parts where DYS is involved directly and indirectly. The last stop for justice involvement under our watch when a youth is discharged from DYS is today's topic. To discuss the different kinds of discharge, the work that goes into those decisions, and how we include crime victims throughout the process, I'm joined by a pair of panelists. Both are under the umbrella of the Release Authority. They are Release Authority Chair Beth Myers and Victim Services Administrator for the Office of Victim Services, Dr. Tiffany Sharp. Appreciate you being here. So before we get into the details of all the work and who it all includes, let's find out more about our guests. Beth? So we'll start with you. What led to you to doing this general line of work, and what all do you do now currently as the chairperson for the Release Authority?
I started out as, way back in my day, I spent some time working in children's services, and that kind of led me to my job, I guess, at DYS, the population I was working with. So started here at DYS in 2007 at our Marion campus, ended up transferring up to Indian River, and I started out as a social worker. From there, I got promoted up at Indian River to the youth advocate, and then got promoted again to the program administrator, which then led me to my job that I was in, which was the board member, which I stayed in that job for about 10, 11 years before I became the chair of the board. At
the board, what are you as the chairman of the board now, or chairperson, I should say? What all do you do now?
I do a lot of things. I say when I write it down on a piece of paper, it doesn't seem like much, but my biggest job is to support our staff, right? I'm there to answer the tough questions. There's a lot of decisions being made, and those decisions are not always what everybody wants. So we have to take into consideration laws. We have to take into consideration the revised code that governs us, take into consideration victim services as well. So my job is really, to support staff, make sure that they have what they want in their decision making, but also to make sure that we're following those laws. So we're constantly looking at revised code and administrative code, tweaking our policies to make sure that they follow that piece as well, and just answering the tough questions that a lot of outside people, they don't understand why we make the decisions we do. Answering those questions.
Yeah, it's a healthy reminder of why and how DYS is involved within the larger spectrum of governance, because you said the legislature dictates the administrative code, judges dictate the terms in terms of at least the minimums and maximums youth can take and must face during DYS kind of care in that way. So Dr. Sharp, we'll transition to you right now. Your background, your whole backstory.
So when I was in graduate school, I was studying to provide therapy services for first responders. But when I was in my internships, I actually did court-ordered anger management for both the victims and the perpetrators of family violence. And then I did a year with the police department providing treatment for their officers and family members. And then I transitioned for my internship into a prison in Illinois that has 3 security levels and has almost all mental health inmates. So after doing a year there, when I came back to Ohio, I was looking for a job, and a job in DYS was available. So when I interviewed, ironically, I was asked to go to Marion in 2007 and work on the mental health unit. And then for about 10 years, I transitioned from facility to facility, working with all the different populations that we have in DYS, until I ended up about 10 years ago getting the opportunity to transfer to Victim Services and run the peer support program and our CISM program. So that was kind of one of my first loves. Now I get to do a little bit of both. And about 2 years ago, I became the administrator.
And what does all the administrator do?
Well, we're an office of 2, so we do a lot of different things. My main roles are probably to keep track of policies and law changes so that we're making sure that all of our things are matching what we're supposed to do for victim notifications. I oversee the peer support program. We also oversee the victim awareness program. But again, since we're an office of 2, I also help with locating and notifying victims of upcoming reviews, being a spokesperson, advocate for those victims when it comes to the Release Authority board, and also providing an opportunity for them to have constant communication during the whole time the youth is with DYS.
Start examining the macro here. So you mentioned kind of some elements of the Release Authority. What is, for those who don't know, and kind of a more fuller explanation, what is the main duty of the Release Authority, or main duties I should say, and who helps you all accomplish them? What's your team look like?
So I have 2 hearing officers and I have 4 board members. I also am a board member, and I can fill in when I need to. We make all the decisions. So the easiest term, right, and the revised code portion of it is that we're the sole decision maker on the release and discharge of youth from the Department of Youth Services. And really what we're doing from the front end for our hearing officers, when kids first come in, they're doing that deep dive into the kids' case file. They're really looking at what the kid has been through, what they need to work on, if there's any court orders that the kid has to complete. So we go through that whole piece of it on the front end to create the release expectations. Those release expectations are their plans. That's the IDT works with that, the disciplinary team in the facilities work with that, and that's what the kids have to work on in order to get out. The long-term kids that we have, so our hearing officers also do progress reviews. So any of our long-term kids that have over a year with us, then they have to have progress reviews on a yearly basis, and they're just doing an update to make sure the kid still remembers what their plan is, what they're required to do. When they get about 60 to 90 days before the release date, which that's the date that the judge originally gave them, then we schedule them for a release review. And that's when the board members come in. It takes 2 board members to make a decision, and they both have to agree whether or not a youth is ready to be released out of the facility. And they take a lot of stuff into consideration for that. So at that point in time, they are also doing another deep dive into the file and looking at what has this kid been through? Has he worked on the stuff that he needs to? Is he really making good decisions? So we're looking at some of the history stuff that brought them in there, the crime that brought them in there, but then we're going into reading all those case notes and all those program requirements and all the things that they completed. We're going into their education and looking to see what teachers are saying. We're checking their medication, looking at their behavior and seeing if we can kind of see what's behind some of that behavior. So we do a lot of that. And then those board members interview the kids, and it's about an hour interview. Sometimes they go longer depending upon how talkative our kids are, and they spend a lot of time just trying to see what they've learned and if they're ready to take that out in the community, and does the kid have a good plan put together that's going to make them be successful when they get out. That's usually the process in the release decision making for the youth. And then we also do discharges for kids who are on parole. Mm-hmm. So once the youth is approved to go home, they create a plan, and a lot of times the release authority has some say in that plan, just in talking about like, hey, is this a good placement for them? So we do a lot of that planning ahead of time with their IDT, and then they talk about that at their release authority. So once they have a great plan put together, that is given to the courts, the kid gets out. Then when we come back around, usually about 60 to 90 days before they're supposed to get discharged off of parole, the board members go back in again and look over that case. Did they meet all of their court requirements? Did they pay restitution if they were required to? They do all those checks and balances, and if the youth has done everything that they're supposed to, then they're discharged on their discharge eligibility date.
I know you mentioned the idea of kind of setting the terms of parole. What are the ranges of a youth being on parole? How, I guess, when they're released from a facility, how long could they potentially be on parole? Right
now we have in our policy anywhere from 90 days up until 270, and that's before the very first review that we hold. So if they haven't completed some goals, and sometimes we have kids who just ask to stay on parole longer because they need the support, and sometimes it's to help pay for a placement, sometimes it's just to give them some additional incentive. So usually I think the average is about 180 for the days that they're on parole. Before the 90 is usually on the lower end, and those are the lower level kids that we have with us. Usually about 180 days on parole, and then we're doing a review on them. And then if they have to stay on parole longer, then we can hold them as long as we need to, but we try to do it in small increments.
Habilitation doesn't extend just to youth, Dr. Sharp. They extend to people who are victims of offenses to make sure they grow and heal as well. What does your office do to help survivors grow and move beyond those setbacks?
We make sure that we are in constant communication with them. They have the opportunity to reach out to us at any point where the youth is either in our facility or on parole. That gives them the opportunity to have a voice through the process. A lot of times once the court process ends, they kind of feel like they are left hanging. So we make sure that we fill that gap for them, that we are there if they have questions, or if they aren't sure if they got restitution, or if they're not sure exactly how long the youth is supposed to be with us for. We can go through and we can find those answers for them and help them give that peace of mind that they need. Plus, talking to us on a regular basis enables them to go through the healing process as well. Their opinions, their thoughts, their feelings, everything changes over time, and talking about it more and more with us gives them the opportunity to process it again and again. And that really helps with the healing process as well.
Sure. Kind of a little pivot here a little bit. We're talking about habilitation, we're talking about growth. I'm sure you've seen a spectrum of youth when you first meet them versus meeting them later on along the lines. Mm-hmm. Are there any things that you notice in terms of positive transformations, or things where you can tell the person you're seeing now is different from the person you met however months or even years ago at that point?
A lot of it's in the language that they talk. So they're talking about the things that they're going to do differently. When they come in the door, they're still talking about, the way things were in the community, going back to that same lifestyle, how they're going to, still take care of themselves. Usually by the time we get to the end of their stay with us, they're talking about, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to, finish my high school education, if they haven't completed it with us. So they're talking more futuristic and not so much about the things that were in the past. And a lot of times they've asked, is there a way that I could go somewhere other than where I came from? And so we find relative placements for them just to keep them out of that same neighborhood. They know when I'm going to fall back into that peer pressure. They ask for that help, and that's a lot with our parole services. They set up that placement, but that release authority review a lot of times is when they bring that up. They really bring up a lot of the things that they're concerned about when they return to the community. So
these decisions, heavy decisions, obviously, we're talking about people's liberties and just making sure they have the best chance to live their best possible lives. As somebody who's lived it, and you're not a judge, but you're kind of still holding a young person's life in your hands. How does that affect you? You're obviously weighing a lot of information from a lot of people, trying to make the best, fullest, objective decision based upon the information that's in front of you.
It weighs heavy on all of our board members. It weighs heavy, and I think that when we see the good things happen, that's the great part, right? That's the part that uplifts us, and that's the part that fills our cup. The part that is the hard part is when they go out and something terrible happens and things go the wrong way. That weighs very, very heavily on all the board members. Quite honestly, sometimes we take that personal. We made a decision for you to go, and we thought you were ready, but you kind of went back to that same lifestyle. And taking into consideration, fortunately, I guess we have peer support under the release authority, so we spend a lot of time talking about a lot of those things. If we lose a kid or they get locked up into the adult sector of things, we talk about that a lot. I've spent many times crying over kids because you don't want to lose anybody, but we can't make all their decisions for them, and we can't hold them forever. Sometimes you're taking chances. Yeah.
Last little follow-up to that. I know you mentioned red flags, environments, any other things that you're trying to be aware of that maybe other people, the youth themselves, might be a little blind to about potential concerns and things that you can maybe help steer them away from in that way?
That's part of their plan, right? When we are interviewing them in their release reviews, those are a lot of the questions we're asking. So we tend to see those red flags on the front end when we're seeing what brought them to us, their friends or an environment or something like that. So we're asking them specifically in their reviews, like, hey, you weren't taking your medication when you were, on probation. What's that going to look like this time? So we have a lot of those conversations with them. Obviously, we're expecting them to be compliant to get that approval to walk out the door from us, but we're also making sure that that's something that they're going to continue. So we're asking, again, those futuristic questions, like, are you still going to take your medication when you get out of here? Are you still, planning on going to school? We really push education a lot. That's a huge precursor for success for our kids. We see that, and we point those out in the reviews. We talk about them. The kids already know them before they even get to us, and they're having those conversations, so they already know what they're going to talk about and what concerns they have.
Anytime I do one of these episodes, I like that I'm just getting to know more about staff, more about entities that I'm not aware of, even being here a couple of years now. And one thing that came across that really surprised me, Dr. Sharp, which makes sense, but you just don't really think about it because it's potentially a third rail in that sense of the Victim Awareness Empathy Program. The idea of, you have a victim, survivor, you have an offender. You guys are willingly trying to get those two linked and kind of have a dialogue in that way right there. How does that all work between, those two sides in that way?
We have the Victim Awareness Empathy Program. We're constantly revising it, updating it, adding new sections to it. We want to reach their youth where they're at. We want to help get them a little bit further along, help them develop remorse, empathy, whatever we can get so that they understand that what they did didn't just impact them. It impacted those people around them. It impacted the victims. It impacted the families, both the victims and the youth. We understand a lot of our youth have also been victims, so we are very trauma informed in the programming that we do. And we work with the youth to write apology letters that the victims are offered if they would like to get a copy of. Some are sincere, some are, written because it's part of the program, but a lot of our victims that request them do appreciate the fact that they have the opportunity to hear from the youth in that respect of what happened or what they were doing or what they're changing and how they're trying to move forward and not go back into the same problems and areas that they were before. So that can be a really useful process for us.
Expanding upon that, understanding that people's actions have consequences, not only directly but also indirectly in that way. You do something every year. National Crime Victims' Rights Week. What's the purpose of that week to get these youth involved, and what all do you do during these these week-long kind of recognitions?
So it's a national event. We participate every single year. We make sure that we bring in speakers. We do activities with the youth. We have facilitators who are in the facilities running victim awareness that will help us, so that we can't be at all the facilities at one time. So they'll take part in making sure that the youth are doing extra groups or doing extra activities. They're learning about how what they did impacted others, how what they did kind of took away a little bit from the world around the person that they took it away from. And so one of the other things that we focus on during National Crime Victim Rights Week is restorative justice. So we give the youth the opportunity to do either some community service. Some of our youth will grow plants that we can donate to local domestic violence shelters. They'll build squirrel houses that we can then take to them. Lots of things like that. So they can see that what they're doing is adding a little bit back into the world, a little bit more beauty. This year we focused on giving all the facilities puzzle pieces, wooden puzzle pieces, and we gave each one a certain color to paint. So every facility painted in like 5 different colors, returned them to us, and we put them together to create a mural that has 2 faces talking to each other. And what we want the youth to get from that is that even a little bit, every little piece, every little, what may seem small and insignificant because it's just one piece of a great big puzzle, can still add up to something really significant and beautiful and put a little bit back into the world.
I love the idea we're pushing about how we all have a little piece in the puzzle in that way, or just the idea that all these little things add up in that sense. When you see the finished product like you guys had right there, it really is a stunning visual just to show just how it all comes together in that sense right there. Brighter days ahead. I know that's why you do what you do. That's why we do what we do as empaths and optimists in that way. DYS has something similar in that realm, the idea of the future that fits in 26 being its own respective mantra. I know what you do, both of you, is very, policy, very specifically driven beyond, what you can kind of sort out by yourselves in that way. That said, what are you trying to do to evolve what you do in Release Authority or Office of Victim Services to not only benefit youth, but also staff as well?
One of the main things that we're doing with the Release Authority is we're working with IT to bring AI into our work, and hopefully that will reduce some of those research hours that we put down for each of our youth. What our goal is, and my goal as the chair, is to hopefully be able to get our board members more out into the facilities and working with youth and talking to kids. Anytime we're seeing them, they crowd us. They want to talk to us. What do I need to do to get out of here? So I think that we're a great resource to help them. We just need to get out of our offices to be able to do that. And we do a lot of reviews, yes. So to be able to do that. And then the other piece, and I know Dr. Sharp is very heavily involved in it, is training. We not only train our facilities and our staff, but train on a national level. We just presented it 2 days in May on our victim awareness class. We've had some inquiries about how other people could do that, and I would just love to see that out in the world where people are being able to bring all that together, because the Release Authority does work so closely with the Office of Victim Services, so it kind of brings all of us together.
One of the latest examples of why Ohio is one of the leaders nationally in terms of juvenile justice in that way. Dr. Sharp, what about victim services?
Sure, we're trying to move forward in technology as well. So we've added QR codes to our website and our letters. We know that a lot of people don't use computers as much. They don't necessarily get mail in the mail anymore. So we do a lot of things via email, and then they can just scan the code. Anytime their address changes, they can scan it and send it directly to us. We're reaching out to the local victim advocates and sharing that information with them. It makes it very easy when they're in court and a youth is receiving their sentence to be able to have the victim right there scan the QR code and get in contact with us from the start. So we're not looking for them after the fact. We already have information from them to start with. And of course, we're doing lots of training as well. We're really excited to see all the different training opportunities that we have coming up in the facilities and locations that are asking us to come out and share our model with them. So that's kind of where we're moving forward as well.
Yeah. Ladies, appreciate you for your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Follow, like, share, subscribe, all the above with your family, friends, acquaintances, pets on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or via video on the Ohio DYS YouTube channel. Thanks for listening and watching. We're honored to have you with us on our journey through juvenile justice here at DYS.